Good evening. Today is Sunday, July 12th, 2026. I'm Rich Stevens, and this is the Cold Take. What you're about to hear is news from the week ending July 11th, taken only from primary sources like press conferences and court documents. You can find those sources and attribution for every story at thecoldtake.com. We begin in Washington, D.C., where questions are growing over Senator Mitch McConnell's health after weeks without a direct public update from the Kentucky Republican. McConnell's office has acknowledged through spokesperson statements that he was hospitalized on June 14th. Since then, the office has said he is improving and working with staff on Kentucky and Senate matters, but it has not publicly explained why he was hospitalized, where he's being treated, or when he is expected to return. The senator has not appeared publicly or issued a direct public statement since that reported hospitalization. Republican allies say they have spoken with him, but the public has not heard from McConnell himself. The Chinese embassy said his wife, Elaine Chao, met Chinese Vice President Han Jing in Beijing on June 17th, 3 days after McConnell's reported hospitalization. A Chao spokesperson later said the trip was long planned, tied to family philanthropic work, and that McConnell's health did not require an immediate return to the United States. On July 8th, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear sent McConnell a public letter asking for more information. Beshear wrote that Kentuckians had grown concerned about McConnell's health, well-being, and ability to hold office. He asked McConnell to fully update Kentuckians on the current status of his health. In Kentucky, a vacant senatorial seat requires a special election, but for that race to fit into Kentucky's November 3rd ballot, the vacancy would likely need to occur by August 3rd. This is because state law gives candidates an August 11 filing deadline when the vacancy happens at least 3 months before the election. On Monday, June 29th, the Supreme Court issued 2 rulings on the president's power to remove federal officials. In Trump v. Slaughter, the court ruled that President Trump could remove Federal Trade Commission Commissioner Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, even though federal law had protected FTC commissioners from removal except for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote that the FTC exercises executive power and that officers who exercise the president's power must be removable by the president. The court overruled what remained of Humphrey's executor, the 1935 case that protected some independent agency officials from removal except for cause. Justice Sonia Sotomayor dissented, joined by Justices Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson. She wrote that Congress and the President have long created bipartisan, multi-member agencies with removal protections to keep some government functions at a distance from direct partisan control. In Trump v. Cook, the court drew a line around the Federal Reserve. President Trump attempted to remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook after allegations that she claimed 2 different properties as her primary residence in mortgage agreements signed 14 days apart. The court did not decide whether those allegations were cause for removal. It refused to let the removal take effect while litigation continues. Roberts wrote that the Federal Reserve follows the historical tradition of the first and second banks of the United States and that monetary policy should not be subject to political interference. The court held that Federal Reserve governors still have for-cause removal protection and that Cook must receive at least some explanation of the evidence and a chance to respond before a final removal decision. The result is a split rule. Most independent agencies exercising executive power are now subject to presidential removal, but the Federal Reserve remains protected. Andrew Gillum, the former Tallahassee mayor who narrowly lost Florida's 2018 governor race, was arrested in Alabama this week on drug-related charges. Records from Baldwin County list Gillum's full name as Andrew Demetric Gillum and show an arrest time of July 2nd at 10:44 p.m. The listed charges are possession of dangerous drugs, drug paraphernalia, and second-degree marijuana possession. Daphne police officers stopped Gillum on US 98 near North Main Street after observing erratic driving, saw a glass pipe on the center console, and recovered rolled marijuana cigarettes and 3 packages of a substance that tested positive for methamphetamine. Gillum was the Democratic nominee for Florida governor in 2018, where he lost narrowly to Ron DeSantis. The arrest follows other legal and personal issues after that campaign. In 2022, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Florida announced a federal indictment accusing Gillum and Sharon Letman Hicks of conspiracy and wire fraud. Gillum was also charged with making false statements to the FBI. He had previously said he was entering treatment after a 2020 Miami Beach incident, saying after his governor race that he had fallen into depression and that led to alcohol abuse. Gillum has made no public statement regarding his most recent arrest. On Monday, July 6th, a woman publicly accused Maine Democratic Senate nominee Graham Platner of raping her in 2021. Jenny Rasico said she and Platner had a casual dating relationship after meeting on Bumble in 2019. She said that near the end of 2021, Platner came into her home while heavily intoxicated and forced himself on her. Platner denied the allegation. In an 11-minute video statement, he said the claims were false. However, his support collapsed quickly. Senator Bernie Sanders said he spoke with Platner and recommended that he step aside. Representative Ro Khanna said sexual assault or violence against women was a red line and withdrew his endorsement. Movement Voter Project said it was glad Platner had exited the race. The Maine Democratic Party said multiple women had made serious, credible allegations against Platner. Party Executive Director Devin Murphy Anderson later accused the Platner campaign of trying to manipulate the replacement process. Platner had already faced controversy over deleted Reddit comments and criticism over a chest tattoo resembling a Nazi symbol. On Wednesday, July 8th, Platner suspended campaign operations and said he intended to file paperwork to withdraw. The Maine Democratic Party says he withdrew that day, and party officials are now moving to choose a replacement nominee through a nominating convention. Moving away from politics, on Tuesday, July 7th, New York City evacuated a Midtown Manhattan construction site and several neighboring buildings after 2 structural columns buckled on the 21st floor of a 37-story high-rise. The building at 235 East 42nd Street was being converted from offices into apartments with 11 new floors added above part of the existing structure. Inspectors also found cracks, sagging floors, and steel beams bending under the weight above them. The building continued moving after firefighters arrived, creating a risk of a localized collapse. All workers were accounted for and no injuries were reported. Emergency crews used drones and precision monitoring equipment, while engineers prepared temporary columns and beams to redistribute the load. The city initially evacuated 7 surrounding buildings and established a frozen zone covering several blocks. 5 neighboring properties or businesses remain under evacuation orders, and East 43rd Street remains closed between 2nd and 3rd Avenues. The Department of Buildings said the project had undergone 2 years of plan review. Officials have not determined whether the added floors contributed to the failure or whether contractors deviated from the approved plans. If you have plans to harvest sea creatures with one who works at the FTC, you have a fishing mission with a commissioner. Like and subscribe. Helps the channel grow. On Tuesday, July 7th, federal authorities announced 24 arrests across the United States, Canada, and Europe in an operation targeting 3 India-based organized crime groups. 3 indictments charged 37 defendants with crimes including assassination, kidnapping, extortion, weapons offenses, and international drug trafficking. Investigators seized about 1,000 kilograms of cocaine, 1 kilogram of heroin, and a dozen firearms. The first indictment targets an organization allegedly run by Lawrence Bishnoi from inside an Indian jail. Bishnoi and his North American leader, Goldie Berar, are accused of ordering the 2023 assassination of a prominent Sikh leader outside a temple in British Columbia. The organization also allegedly stole more than 1,100 pounds of cocaine from rival gangs around Los Angeles. Barrar remains at large with a $50,000 FBI reward. A second organization was allegedly run from another Indian jail by Jagu Bhagwapuria. Prosecutors said the group worked with corrupt Indian officials to threaten families and file false criminal charges. One defendant allegedly continued an extortion scheme while in Immigration and Customs Enforcement custody, threatening to put bullets in a victim's children. The third indictment targets a trucking network accused of moving hundreds of kilograms of cocaine and methamphetamine from Southern California into Canada. Drugs were concealed in commercial trucks, including trucks connected to working farms. 15 defendants operating in the United States are also in the country illegally. Authorities said the organizations targeted Indian communities in the United States and Canada by threatening victims and their relatives in India. 10 defendants remained fugitives following the operation. On Tuesday, July 7th, Texas Governor Greg Abbott ordered an investigation into Mission Regional Medical Center after the hospital advertised South Texas birth packages to foreign customers. The advertisements offered deliveries beginning at around $4,000. Abbott said the hospital appeared to be profiting from foreign parents seeking American citizenship for children born in the United States. The hospital denied facilitating anything illegal and said it advertises healthcare services like other hospitals while complying with state and federal law. Texas Representative Brian Harrison called for the legislature to go further and prohibit birth certificates when neither parent is an American citizen. One day later, President Trump said the advertisements showed the consequences of the Supreme Court's June 30th Birthright Citizenship ruling. The court held that children born here to parents who are illegally or temporarily in the country are American citizens at birth. Trump called the hospital advertising a citizenship scam and said, quote, "I will be asking for a rehearing by the United States Supreme Court, all caps, immediately." A 5-day preliminary hearing for the accused killer of Charlie Kirk ended without a ruling on whether the case will proceed to trial. Campus surveillance showed a man investigators identified as the accused visiting Utah Valley University several times before returning shortly before the shooting. He climbed onto the Losey Center roof, moved into a prone position, then ran across the roof and into a wooded area after Kirk was shot. Police found a Mauser .30-06 bolt-action rifle wrapped in a towel along that route. 1 fired casing and 3 unfired cartridges were inside, each carrying engraved messages. Investigators later recovered a Dremel tool, .30-06 ammunition, and 5 fired casings from the accused home. Examiners concluded those casings had been fired from the recovered rifle and that one of the Dremel bits made the engravings. The fired casing inside the rifle was also tied to that weapon. The damaged bullet fragment recovered during Kirk's autopsy could not be conclusively matched or excluded. DNA testing supported the defendant's inclusion on several parts of the rifle and ammunition, often at the laboratory's reporting cap of at least 1 trillion to 1. Separate testing produced ratios of 1.7 octillion to 1 for a towel and 30 quintillion to 1 for a screwdriver found on the roof. The DNA experts emphasized that those results could not establish when or how the DNA was disposed or what activity produced it. The samples contained multiple contributors and several were degraded. The defendant's roommate and romantic partner, Lance Twiggs, said the accused left early on the morning of the shooting. At 11 that night, Twiggs received a message directing him to a note hidden beneath the defendant's keyboard. In additional messages, Twiggs asked, quote, "You weren't the one who did it, right?" The response, attributed to the defendant, said, quote, I'm sorry." He allegedly said he had planned the attack for a little more than a week, left the rifle wrapped in a towel where he changed clothes, and repeatedly tried to retrieve it while police remained nearby. When Twiggs asked why, the response stated, quote, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." A later message said, quote, "I'm going to turn myself in willingly." Twiggs testified that the defendant returned home the next day, confirmed the messages were true, cried, and said he wished he had not done it. The defense highlighted that no casing was found on the roof, the bullet comparison was inconclusive, and usable fingerprints near the landing excluded the accused. The surveillance footage also did not provide facial recognition or identification. The court will hear bind-over arguments Tuesday, September 1st at 10 a.m. before deciding whether the charges will proceed to trial. In world news, the war with Iran returned to major military exchanges this week after another collapse of the ceasefire around the Strait of Hormuz. On Tuesday, July 7th, U.S. Central Command struck more than 80 targets inside Iran, including air defenses, command networks, coastal radar, anti-ship missile systems, and more than 60 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps small boats. CENTCOM said Iran had attacked 3 commercial vessels in the strait. American forces struck approximately 90 more targets on Wednesday, including missile and drone storage sites, naval capabilities, and military logistics along Iran's coast. Iran disputes the shipping allegations and says the United States used incidents involving what it called non-compliant vessels as a pretext for new attacks. Iran said the strikes also hit 2 railway bridges and killed several naval personnel, but it did not provide a complete casualty count. The International Maritime Organization has now confirmed 52 incidents connected to the conflict and 14 seafarer deaths since the war began February 28th. Approximately 20,000 seafarers, port workers, and offshore personnel remain affected. Neither country has formally abandoned the June agreement intended to end the war. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said Friday that Iran remains open to an agreement if earlier commitments are honored, while CENTCOM says American forces remain prepared for additional strikes. Markets were mixed this week. The Dow Jones closed at 52,637, a 263-point loss, right at 0.5%. NASDAQ, however, gained 1.75%, adding 449 points, and closing at 26,281. The S&P 500 added 92 points, closed at 7,575, a gain of 1.25%. Gold slipped, losing $38, and closing trading at $4,113 per ounce, down nearly 1%. And in sports, Formula One was at Silverstone last weekend for the 2026 British Grand Prix. Kimi Antonelli won the sprint race on Saturday, July 4th, ahead of Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris. He looked positioned to extend his championship lead again after qualifying on pole for the main event. However, he suffered a mechanical issue and came home in 8th. Verstappen crashed out with 4 laps to go, and the stewards ended the race under a safety car. Leclerc got the win for Ferrari, with George Russell and Lewis Hamilton rounding out the podium. Anyone who tells you it was dramatic or thrilling was not watching the race. Antonelli's lead is now just 25 points over his teammate George Russell, and the nails are in the coffin for Formula One. The World Cup is down to 6 teams as of Saturday, July 11th. By the time this video airs, England will have faced Norway and Argentina will have squared off against Switzerland. Those winners will play on July 15th, with the winner of that match facing the winner of France-Spain on July 14th. The final is July 19th at 3 p.m. Eastern. That's U.S. time. At Wimbledon, Coco Gauff narrowly missed out on the finals, falling in a tiebreak in the 3rd set of the semifinals to Karolina Muchova. Muchova faced fellow Czech Linda Noskova in the final, but was ultimately defeated. It's the first major win for Noskova, who's just 21 years old and currently ranked 9th in the world. On the men's side, Sinner took out Djokovic in straight sets to advance to the finals. Novak said afterwards that he hopes to play in one more Wimbledon tournament. Center will look to secure back-to-back Wimbledon titles on Sunday, July 12th at 11 a.m. Eastern against Alexander Zverev. And finally, in MLB, we're heading into the All-Star break this week. We won't see Ohtani or Mizurowski as Shohei skipped a start and is opting out of the All-Star game to rest his knee, while the Miz is protecting his starting schedule. The Dodgers seem okay though. They sit 13.5 games ahead in the NL West. The Brewers now hold a 7-game advantage over the Cubs in the NL Central, and in the East, the Phillies are within 3 games of the Braves. In the American League, New York sits 4 games behind Tampa. The White Sox are tied with Cleveland in the Central Division with a 3-game lead on the Twins. In the West, 1.5 games separates the Rangers from the Mariners. And like it or not, that's what happened. I'm Rich Stevens, and this has been The Cold Take. Your commissioner dishing on the fishing mission. Got it. If you work for the FTC and you come to work on Monday and tell stories about your angling trip, you're dishing. If you work for the FTC and you take a weekend angling expedition and then you come to work on Monday and talk about it, you're a commissioner dishing on the fishing mission. Hit like and subscribe. I can probably come up with more of those. When reflecting on his weekend angling trip, the commissioner dishing on the fishing mission was wishing the fishing conditions had been more efficient, insisting the fish went missing due to deficient hook position precision, and petitioning the commission for permission to commission a fishing mission omission investigation to determine whether suspicious fishing mission interference diminished the fish acquisition. I'll see myself out.